Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. This video is going to be a little bit different today because I'm going to talk about one of my favorite type of subjects that I could usually think of. Gotta hate my life. But aside from all the depressing stuff that we already been through, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite locomotives that I adore, and so you guys can enjoy one of my lists. I gotta show you, this is my list. You can have your own opinions and type down in the comments what is your favorite type of locomotive. It could be a diesel, it could be electric, it could be a diesel electric, it could be a hybrid, and it could be a steam locomotive. But this list specifically, because I love any type of locomotive, even diesels, which I'm not really a big fan of, but I still agree to their premise. Now, what I am going to be talking about is my favorite steam locomotives, because it's about to be Christmas, and I feel like this is going to be a great opportunity to do something steam related, because steam locomotives, they're kind of the ideal things that you find under a Christmas tree, or just in Christmas tradition, but mostly it's just like the train part, not like the steam engine, but it's very authentic because back in the day, in the 30s, it was just regulated then. So I have a list here so I can remember every single name and say it correctly, because last time I tried to do this back in the day, I was pretty bad at pronouncing certain names, and sometimes I couldn't even find where the information was. I'm going to start down from 10 to 1. 1 being my favorite locomotive of all time, 10 being somewhat up there, but still in one of my favorite lineups. Number 10. DR Class 52.80. This is a German class locomotive. There were 200 of them made between 1960 and 1967. This is a 210O and it is from Germany. Now, there wasn't a lot of information about this locomotive, but there's still a lot of them around. I believe it's 80 that are still around today in Germany. But it's a big number for German locomotives. A lot of those types of locomotives, they were part of the World War II era. Those were like the main type of locomotives that they run for passenger and freight. They weren't really like scheduled for freight or passenger, they just like had to do the job, and it wasn't regulated to like a 5FP8 or something like that. That's all I know about the locomotive. It's a very good design, has a red and black color scheme like most German locomotives do. But back in the day and during the World War II eras, they were mostly black and like have a little bit of accents of red because of Nazi symbols that have on front. Enough of that of number 10. Let's go to our next number. Number 9. Pennsylvania's Railroads E6s. They were made in 1910 through 1914. 83 of them were made. And there were a 442 configuration of locomotive. They were pretty powerful locomotives at the time, and they didn't really explain if it was a mixed traffic or a passenger. But what I found out was just mostly for passenger locomotives, but it had a very great speed of 50 to 60 miles per hour. At that time, that was pretty amazing. These designs were made by Alfred W. Gibbs. Mostly, he created a lot of locomotives for the Pennsylvania Railroad around my area of the East Coast. Very good designer, and I believe he should deserve a promotion, which I believe he did at his time. Now, there's not a lot of information about Alfred, but most of the information is from all his locomotives that he designed and created and built. Number 8. The Class 4 tank locomotive. The number boards for these type of locomotives were 800,000 through 154. So there were 4 mixed traffic, which means they can do both freight and passenger and haul a pretty good weight. So these trains can carry about 16 to 20 passenger cars. That's a pretty big number for maximum, but they didn't really carry that much. And they can carry about 20 to 24 freight cars, which is really a lot at that time. Yeah, it's interesting for that matter. Anyhow, they were 264 tank configuration. They didn't have any tender, it was a part of the locomotive, that's why it's called a tank locomotive. Only 155 of them were in which they were made through 1951 to 1957. There were about 15 of them preserved, at least I believe. That's all I read up from information from Wikipedia, but could be wrong on that front. There could only be 1 or 3 of them, you never know. But they were created in 1951 and 1957. They were withdrawn during the BR standardization in the 1960s. Number 7. Milwaukee Road Class A type locomotives. These locomotives were pretty famous at the time in the Milwaukee Railroad. At the time, there were the famous streamliners in the 1930s that ran across the way until the 1950s when they were withdrawn. And there are more information about these type of locomotives. They were counted as the third most beautiful and fascinating type of locomotive that was ever created at the time. Now, there were many more created beforehand that were counted as the first, the second, the third, but she was overruling them at the time. Now, there were about 3 to 5 locomotives that were created in this type of class, and their running numbers were 68684, 5, 729, this is the last numbers of 684, and 828. And there's a lot more information that if you want to look it up, I'll put a link in the description where I can show you what type of locomotives there are. Number 6, Thompson B1. This locomotive was built by Sir Thompson. Despite of the name, was a very famous designer for a certain type of locomotives in the LMS LNER. Their running numbers were 61273 through 409. There were a lot of locomotives that were made in this type of format. Now, there were 5 mixed traffic, so they carried freight and passenger, and they were pretty powerful. There were about 20 passenger cars to 24 passenger cars that they can carry by maximum, and they can carry about 30 freight cars. Now, there were 460 configuration. They weren't a Pacific type, but they had like the light-based Pacific types. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's a lot more information I'll show in the link in the description. And now 136 of them were made, and they were made through 1948 to 1952, and most of them were scrapped except for a few of them in the 1960s when BR railways were again standardized. Number 5, West Country / Battle of Britain class. This type of locomotive was during the Southern Railway in the UK. At the time, they were pretty obsolete and very unique from their slimline exterior. From that, they were very easy to clean, and they didn't have a lot of time to fix anything because everything was on the outside. It's basically, think of it as a shell from a snail. If you take that off, that exposes the body area, and that's where most of the mechanics are. Then the whole slimline exterior can pop back on, and it's kind of like a hood of a car or a snail. The running numbers were through 34071 to 110. There were a 7 passenger and 5 freight. So they can carry about 14 to 16 passenger cars and about maybe like 10 to 20 freight cars. Now, there were 462 configuration. They were also known as Light Pacifics. They were very lightweight, and they can go pretty quickly to up to 70 to 80 miles per hour at top speeds. Now, these locomotives were created in 1948 through 1951. 40 of them were created during that timeline until basically half of them were scrapped, but 20 of them are still around today in either a museum or being restored at this moment. And like I said, everything for more information will be in the link in this. Number 4, Standard Black 5 class. This locomotive was very, very unique and famous at the time, where everything was going out of bounds. They were the most popular locomotive for the British era in World War II and even World War I. They were starting out World War I, so they only got up to the end of World War I. But in World War II, they were very popularized. They were all over the place. They carried passenger, they carried freight, they carried everything. And the running boards go through 44658 to 757. That's the last 3 digits of that number. And there were 5 mixed traffic, so they can carry loads of carts. They were a very powerful, unique type of locomotives. And not a lot of people actually give love to them as in their favorite types of locomotives. I believe they deserve to be on this list. There were 460 configuration of type of locomotives. There were 100 of them made, which is pretty surprising at the time. And they were built around 1948 to 1951. Well, that's when they were mostly used. Some in World War I, they were starting out as for designs, but they were mostly in World War II. So the Standard Black 5s, there could be the Standard Black, as one show called. I don't know a lot about the history of the Black 5s, but it's one of my favorite type of locomotives. In the 4th place it would be deserved. Number 3, the 4037 Castle class. This type of locomotive was from the GWR Railway, Great Western Railway, and around the areas of Scotland. They were standardized by the British Railways at the time later on when British Railways were taken over for standardization, and the running number codes would go through 7008 through 37. That's the last 2 digits. And there were a 7P, so they were basically express type passenger locomotive. There were a 460 configuration as well, and as I realized, there's a lot of 460 type of configurations in, but I really like these type of locomotives. The bigger ones, I feel like they have a lot more. There were 30 of them made, and they were mostly produced in the 30s going through 1948 to 1950. Now some of these years are really off for some reason. I've been trying to look for the proper year of when they were built in the first round, because they were built way younger back in the day, when GWR was kind of starting. That's at least what I believe. If you want to find out a little bit more information about it, you can. Number 2, Norfolk and Western Railway J class, specifically 611. Now, this locomotive was built in Rockapoke, if I'm saying that correctly, and this particular locomotive was made in May 29th, 1950. This locomotive was very famous when Norfolk and Western was being standardized within coal, and very quickly became very popular as a very fast transport of passenger trains. And particular type can carry a lot of cars. Around normal type is about 12. The maximum is about 32. They were very powerful locomotives, and the reason why I put her in second place because that's where I mostly seen her in certain shows and TV shows and what I saw her back when I was little. Now before I go on to the 1, I want to give a few different shout outs to certain type of locomotives that I still adore that should be on the list, but I had to take them off. One of them was the Flounder class 3F Ginty class, as they was shortly called, from the LMS Railway, London, Midland, Scotland. They were a 060 tank locomotive, and they were responsible for all developments in the Midland Railways, 6-couple and tank engines. Build date in 1924. Fuel type was coal for the most part. Some of them were oiled, and there were about 422 of them were made. It's a really big number for LMS locomotive. And the designer was Henry Flounder. And the other locomotive that should have been on this list, but I couldn't really fit it in because I had to choose, was the Flying. And you probably know a lot of history about the Flying Scotsman, so I didn't really need to tell anything about it. But if you want a link to the Wikipedia page that I found, it'll be in the description. Now, for my final, number 1 most favorite locomotive that I have on this list that will stay true to my heart. Number 1, the Southern Pacific 4449 Daylight. This locomotive was built in the 1930s through 1940s. They were pretty famous locomotives for the Southern Pacific Railway. They took care of California and the coast. That's how they get the scheme Daylight. The scheme of it was usually the orange color of the, which is reminiscent to the actual name of the locomotive. But this particular locomotive, the 4449, is the last surviving type locomotive that survived from scrappage. This is the last steam locomotive in the Daylight scheme that survived during that era in the 1960s. It was transported to Hawaii after reconsideration of diesel locomotives, and it was stayed in the museum for about 10 to 15 years. Then later on, the Washington Museum of Railroading took this locomotive in and put it as his prized possession and made it into running conditions because she was retired after she went back to Hawaii. Then in 2001, after the locomotive was symbolized as a locomotive that was called the American Freedom Train. At the time of early 2000, when everyone could be an American at the time, there was 3 choices between 3 different steam locomotives. One of them was from the Baltimore, Ohio Railroad, now it's called American's Freedom. And another one was a diesel locomotive, in which the actual railroad was from that, didn't really explain it and scrapped it after the competition was over. But the other one was the Southern Pacific 4449. For that, it was one of the most beautiful locomotives in the world, even back in the day. Well, mostly in America, but I say in the world because it's one of my favorites. She was chosen to be the American Freedom Train, so she got the scheme of red, white, and blue color scheme instead of the Daylight scheme. Now in 2001, when the museum took over for her in the 1990s, they do that almost every year on 4th of July for the American Freedom Train scheme. And there were many different type of cars that were put on her for an American Freedom Train. Most of those cars were just recolor skins from the actual regular cars that the daylight showed. But they had a few special cars here and there, like talking about the presidents. And there's a Lionel train that usually explains that about the American Freedom Train. It's pretty big for all the cars, everything on it. So yeah, those are my top 10 favorite locomotives for Steam, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Ratings are very much appreciated. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Leave a dislike on the video if you don't enjoy it, and please leave a comment down below and tell me what I need to fix in my videos. I'm open for any suggestion that I need. Please help me. I'm kind of losing my mind. Yeah. Hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas. And stay healthy, folks.